Welcome to Skinner and Chalmers Weekly Roast. Today, The End of the Road, a poignant story that reveals its hidden truth.
Hello there, Memmerfield. Is your favorite duo, Skinner and Chalmers, back with another weekly roast?
That's right, folks. We've got a fresh batch of quotes from our neighbors, some hilarious hijinks from around the field, and a new segment that'll leave you in stitches.
Before we dive into all that, Chalmers, I must ask, how was your weekend? You spent it with those fur balls, didn't you?
Oh boy, Shadow and Sonic invited me over for a gardening experiment. Let's just say there were more mud pies than flour, bed pies.
That sounds like quite the adventure. I hope Cosmo wasn't too jealous of all that camaraderie.
Well, he did try to join in by chasing Sonic around the yard. You should have seen them, Skinner. It was like a high-speed game of tag gone awry.
I'm just glad we don't have any neighbors with motion-activated sprinklers. Can you imagine Cosmo's face if he got caught off guard?
Oh, trust me, Skinner, that day will come eventually. We just need to be there with our cameras ready.
Speaking of neighbors, have you heard the latest from Anna and Echo? They've started a baking competition, and it's gotten quite heated.
No way. I missed that. What happened?
Well, Anna made this gorgeous batch of macarons. You know, those fancy French cookies.
Oh, I love those. I can go for a dozen right now.
Bing! Hold on to your sweet tooth. Chalmers, as I will say. Anna's macarons were a huge hit with Echo and Master Chief then. Echo decided she wanted in on the action.
Oh boy, here we go.
Right? So, Echo decides to make an improved version of Anna's recipe by adding blue food coloring for a Reddit appeal. She posted online, and suddenly Team Echo is going toe-to-toe with Team Anna.
I can just hear them now. Anna's cookies are stale, Echo's are blue.
Exactly. And you know what? Yugi got involved too, claiming that baking is an ancient art form, passed down through generations of pharaohs.
Oh, dear Lord, that just escalated from a bake off to an Egypt. Off.
Well, at least it gave us all something to laugh about at the next block party. Now, Chalmers, before we start our new segment, I heard you've been working on some interesting recipes lately.
Oh, those. It's just a little hobby, Skinner.
With titles like Volcanic Chili and the Screaming Melted Cheese Incident, I'd say it's more than just a hobby.
Well, you know what they say. If it doesn't burn your fingers when you're cooking it, it won't light up your taste buds when you're eating it.
I think that might be the first time I've ever heard someone defend their cooking by saying their food is too dangerous to handle.
Hey, at least it's not boring. Speaking of which, Skinner, don't you have a new dish you're eager to try out?
Oh, absolutely. I found this recipe for dragon's breath pasta. It's got everything. Exotic spices, ancient secrets, and just the right amount of smoke to make our fire alarms go off.
Something with a dragon's breath pepper again. You seem to like it a lot. You've cooked something with this ingredient before. Well, considering our last dinner together ended with me having to fan your eyebrows back into place, I can't wait to see what kitchen chaos this one brings us.
That's the spirit. Now, before we're totally getting caught in small talk, let's talk about our main topic today. So, Chalmers, you did conquer something quite formidable this week, a story. And not just any story, but one you crafted with, some rather unusual help.
Ah, yes, the sea ape. An unlikely partner, but surprisingly insightful when it comes to melancholy tales.
A sea ape and a melancholic story? Now, that's a combination I never thought I'd hear. On the other hand, a sea ape already show his poetic capabilities. But what on earth inspired that collaboration?
Well, it all started with a simple observation. Sometimes the things that seem the most distant are the ones that stay with us the longest, like a balloon at the end of a long, lonely road.
A balloon, you say? You've piqued my interest. So what's the deal with this balloon? Is it filled with helium, hopes, or just a bunch of hot air?
I'd say it's filled with a little bit of all those things. The balloon is a symbol, something that feels just out of reach no matter how far you travel. But of course there's more to it than that.
Of course there is. There's always more with you, Chalmers. So what's the twist? What's the catch that makes this balloon so special?
Well, I can't just give it all away in the first scene, can I? Let's just say this story takes a path that's a little blurry at first.
Blurry? Huh? Sounds like the kind of story that sneaks up on you with its meaning, or maybe one that you need to look at from just the right angle.
Precisely. It's a story that reveals itself slowly, like coming into focus after a long stare. And by the time you get to the end, well, I think it might just open your eyes in more ways than one.
Now I'm really intrigued. You got me hooked, Chalmers. Can't wait to dive into this tale, but before we do, tell me, what was it like working with the sea ape? Yeah, I know he's a bit of a deep thinker, maybe even a philosopher of sorts.
Deep thinker might be an understatement. He's got a way of seeing the world that's different. He looks at the smallest things and finds the most profound meanings in them. It was actually quite refreshing, if not a bit bizarre at times.
Sounds like the perfect partner for a story like this. I mean, ooh,
Exactly, it's those different perspectives that make a story come to life. And trust me, this one's got plenty of life in it, albeit the quiet, reflective kind.
I'm all for a bit of quiet reflection, especially when it comes with a twist. So without further ado, let's jump into this melancholic masterpiece of yours. What's it called, by the way?
It's simply titled The Balloon at the End of the Road. But as you'll see, it's not just any road, and certainly not just any balloon.
I wouldn't expect anything less. All right, folks, settle in because we're about to take you on a journey that starts with a balloon but ends, well, you'll have to find out for yourself. So, Chalmers, I have to admit, I'm really curious about this story of yours. You've got a lonely balloon that never gets any closer, and a sea ape who sounds like he's part Socrates, part Dr. C.S. How does all of this come together? What's the next part of this melancholic journey?
Yeah, Skinner, the next part is where things start to get a bit more introspective. You see, our traveler, still following that distant balloon, begins to notice that the road isn't just any road. It changes. It twists and turns, the surroundings shift, and suddenly they're not just walking a road. They're walking through their memories.
Memories. So this isn't just a physical journey. It's an emotional one, too.
Exactly. The road begins to represent different stages of life. The traveler starts to see scenes from their past, but they're not just reminiscing. These memories are almost like checkpoints, moments where the road seemed clearer, but the balloon was still just as distant.
That's a pretty heavy metaphor, Chalmers. So we're talking about life's milestones, right? Birthdays, graduations, that first disastrous attempt at making a shuffle.
Precisely. Each milestone is represented by a scene they pass, but there's always that balloon, still distant, still just out of reach. It's as if the traveler can never fully capture those moments, can never really hold on to them.
That's kind of heartbreaking, actually. It's like a reminder that no matter how hard you try, you can't go back. The past is always just a little out of reach, a little blurry.
Exactly, Skinner. That's the point. The story plays on that feeling of longing, that slight sadness of never being able to truly grasp what's gone by. But the traveler isn't discouraged. They're determined. They keep walking, keep hoping that maybe, just maybe, they'll catch up to that balloon.
And what about the sea ape? Is he just standing by watching all of this unfold, or does he have more to say?
Oh, he's not done yet. The sea ape appears at every major turn, offering what seems like nonsensical advice. But each time, his words resonate a bit more deeply. He talks about how vision is both a blessing and a curse, how seeing too clearly can sometimes blind you to the things that truly matter.
That's pretty profound coming from a sea ape. I mean, most people wouldn't expect that kind of wisdom from a creature who probably spends half his day chasing after fish.
That's the beauty of it, Skinner. The sea ape represents that part of us that sees beyond the obvious, that understands the importance of perspective. He's not just a guide for the traveler, he's a guide for the reader, too. He challenges us to think about what we're really looking for in life.
I liked it. It's like he's saying, don't just focus on the destination, enjoy the journey, and maybe stop to smell the seaweed along the way.
Exactly. And as the traveler continues, they start to notice that the road isn't just their memories. It's everyone's memories. It's a collective experience. The traveler sees scenes from other lives, other people's milestones, and it begins to dawn on them that the balloon isn't just their own desire. It's a shared symbol of everyone's hopes and dreams.
That's a really interesting twist. So the road becomes almost like a tapestry of human experience, and the balloon, well, what is the balloon at this point? A symbol of what we all strive for but never quite attain?
You've hit the nail on the head, Skinner. The balloon represents that unattainable ideal, whatever it may be for each person. It could be happiness, success, love, understanding. It's different for everyone, but the feeling of chasing something that always seems just out of reach is universal.
That's deep, Chalmers, but it also makes me think about how we often overlook the things we have because we're so focused on that distant balloon. We're so busy looking ahead that we forget to appreciate what's right in front of us.
That's exactly what the sea ape tries to convey. He tells the traveler to look around, to appreciate the journey itself. But the traveler is so fixated on the balloon that they can't fully grasp the sea ape's wisdom. At least, not yet.
So, does the traveler ever realize this? Do they ever stop and take a moment to appreciate the scenery? Or are they just perpetually chasing that balloon?
Well, that's the crux of the story, isn't it? The traveler is on a path of discovery, and it's not until much later that they start to understand the sea ape's words. But even then, the balloon remains just as distant. It's a bittersweet realization that sometimes what we're chasing isn't meant to be caught. It's meant to inspire us to keep going.
That's both beautiful and a little tragic. It reminds me of that old saying, the journey is the reward. But it also makes me wonder, if the journey is the reward, what happens when we reach the end of the road?
And that's the question the story leaves you with, Skinner. The traveler eventually reaches what seems to be the end of the road, but the balloon is still there, floating just out of reach. It's as if the journey was never about reaching the balloon, but about the experiences and insights gained along the way.
And what does the traveler do at the end? Do they finally understand what the sea ape was trying to tell them?
The traveler does come to an understanding, but it's a quiet one. They realize that the road never truly ends. It just changes. And the balloon? It's still there, but it's no longer the focus. The traveler finally looks around and sees the beauty in the journey itself, in the memories and experiences that have shaped them.
That's a powerful message, Chalmers. It's like the traveler has been looking through a narrow lens this whole time, only to finally zoom out and see the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's a story about perception, about how we choose to see the world and our place in it. The sea ape's advice wasn't just for the traveler. It was for all of us. Sometimes we need to step back and appreciate the journey rather than obsessing over the destination.
I love that. It makes me think about all the times I've been so focused on achieving something that I forgot to enjoy the process. It's a reminder to slow down and take in the sights along the way.
That's the hope, Skinner. A story is meant to resonate on different levels, depending on where you are in your own journey. And the best part? It leaves room for interpretation for each reader to find their own meaning in the traveler's quest.
That's the beauty of storytelling, isn't it? It's like holding up a mirror to your own experiences and seeing something new reflected back. So what happens next in this tale? Does the sea ape have any more cryptic wisdom to share?
Oh, the sea ape always has more to say. As the traveler nears what seems to be the end, the sea ape reappears one last time. This time, his words are more direct, almost as if he knows the traveler is ready to hear them.
And what does he say? I'm on the edge of my seat here.
He tells the traveler that the balloon was never the destination. It was a guide, a way to keep them moving forward even when the path seemed unclear. He says that sometimes the things we chase are just reflections of what we already carry within us. It's not about reaching the balloon, but about the journey it inspired.
That's deep. It's like the balloon was just a catalyst for growth, not the end goal itself.
Exactly. And with that realization, the traveler feels a sense of peace. They no longer see the balloon as something to catch, but as a reminder of the journey they've taken. It's a moment of clarity, where everything comes into focus.
I'm starting to see where this is going, Chalmers. The story isn't just about a journey down a road. It's about how we perceive the world and our place in it. And that balloon? It's a symbol of all the things we think we want, but perhaps they are just a cover for something completely different that we want in life. Maybe we want to go to university, get a good job, and earn a lot of money, but maybe that's just a cover for what's actually behind it. Security, fulfillment, prestige, joy, dedication, and so on. And you know, Chalmers, as I was listening to you talk about the traveler and the sea ape, I couldn't help but think about something. The way you described the road, the memories, and that elusive balloon. It all got me thinking about how we see the world and how that perception can change over time. It's almost like looking through a pair of glasses. Have you ever wondered how much our eyesight affects how we experience life?
Skinner, you're onto something there. It's funny how a simple thing like eyesight can have such a profound impact on our understanding of the world around us. The clearer we see, the more we think we know, and yet there's always that uncertainty. What if we're missing something? What if there's more to see than meets the eye?
Exactly. And it makes me wonder, what about those who don't see so clearly? Does their world feel different? Do they perceive things in ways we can't even imagine?
I think they do. You know, there's that old saying, the eyes are the windows to the soul, but I sometimes think it's the opposite. What if the soul shapes how we see with our eyes? What if the soul shapes? Maybe those who have less than perfect vision are seeing a different kind of truth, one that's not bound by the sharp lines and clear edges that we rely on.
That's an interesting thought, Chalmers. So you're saying that someone who's nearsighted or farsighted might be experiencing a different reality, that their blurry view could be a different kind of clarity.
In a way, yes. I'm not saying that having poor eyesight is a gift, but it does force you to rely on other senses, to pay attention to details that might be overlooked if you could see everything clearly. Maybe that's why the traveler in our story kept chasing the balloon. It was always just out of focus, just beyond clear sight. It kept them moving forward, kept them curious.
It's almost like the balloon was a metaphor for the things in life that are just beyond our grasp. The things we know are there but can't quite make out, and maybe that's why the traveler kept going, because they were driven by that need to see more, to understand what was just out of reach.
Yes, and that's the beauty of it. The balloon could represent anything. The unknown, the unattainable, even our deepest fears or desires. It's always there, just a little blurry, just a little out of focus, but it's what keeps us moving, keeps us searching.
And isn't that what life is all about? We're all on this journey, trying to make sense of things, trying to see clearly, but there's always something just beyond our sight, something we're reaching for.
Exactly. And it's that reaching, that striving, that makes life so interesting. If we could see everything clearly, if we knew all the answers, what would be the point? It's the mystery, the uncertainty that gives life its depth, its meaning. Ultimately, each of us has to ask ourselves the question, what actually makes me happy? A simple question, but sometimes an extremely difficult one to answer. We chase after this answer, and it constantly changes in life, just like the balloon is never within reach.
You know, Chalmers, you've really got me thinking about this whole eyesight thing in a different way. It's like when you go to the eye doctor and they put those different lenses in front of your eyes, asking you, is this better or this? And sometimes it's hard to tell because each lens gives you a slightly different view of the same thing.
That's a perfect analogy, Skinner. Life is like looking through those different lenses, trying to find the one that gives you the clearest view. But sometimes the clearest view isn't the best one. It's the one that makes you think, makes you see things from a different perspective.
And isn't that what the sea ape was trying to tell the traveler? That sometimes it's not about seeing clearly, but about seeing differently. It's about appreciating the journey, the twists and turns, even if they're a little blurry.
Exactly. The sea ape was trying to get the traveler to stop focusing so much on the balloon and start looking around. Start noticing the details along the way, because in the end, it's those details that make the journey worthwhile, that give it color and texture. The literary ego only ever sees the balloon at the end of the road against a blue sky. The traveler is focused on it, but if you gradually zoom out of the picture, you recognize a small forest, a small white farmhouse, a town on the horizon. It is as if you change your viewing level to a higher one. The further you zoom out, the better you understand the big picture and the smaller the details become. If, on the other hand, you were to zoom in on the picture, you could see, for example, a small ant crawling on the balloon basket, something you can't see from the macro level. It's always about the perspective and the change between the layers.
And maybe that's why the traveler kept moving forward even though they couldn't catch the balloon. Maybe they realized that it wasn't about catching it at all, but about what they experienced along the way.
Precisely. The journey was the reward, not the destination. And that's a lesson we can all take to heart. We're all travelers on our own roads, with our own balloons in the distance. But it's what we do along the way that defines us, that shapes our stories.
You're right, Chalmers. And it makes me think about how we sometimes get so caught up in our goals, in our desire to achieve something that we forget to appreciate the little moments, the things that happen along the way.
That's the danger of having too clear a vision, too singular a focus. It can blind us to the beauty of the journey, to the experiences and connections that make life rich and meaningful.
And it's funny, because when you think about it, even our eyesight is never truly perfect. We have blind spots. We see things differently depending on the light, the angle, even our mood. The world we're experiencing is basically a product of our mind or brain, and everyone lives in a different world, so to speak. So maybe perfection isn't the goal at all. Maybe it's about embracing the imperfections, the blurriness, and finding the beauty in that.
I couldn't agree more. Perfection is an illusion, something we strive for but never truly attain. And that's okay. And that's okay. It's the imperfections, the flaws that make life interesting, that give it character.
Well, you've really given me a lot to think about, Chalmers. I never would have guessed that a simple story about a traveler and a balloon could lead to such deep reflections on life and perception.
That's the magic of storytelling, Skinner. It can take the simplest of ideas and turn them into something profound, something that resonates on a deeper level. And I think that's what makes this story so special. It's not just about the traveler's journey, but about all of our journeys and the lessons we learn along the way.
Very deep and a wonderful story you and the sea ape have created. But Chalmers, I've been thinking about that story you wrote, and I can't shake the feeling that there's more to it than just a metaphorical journey. What inspired you to write about a traveler and a balloon? Was there a specific moment that sparked the idea?
I'm glad you asked, Skinner. Funny enough, the idea came to me during something as mundane as an eyesight test. I was sitting in the optometrist's chair, staring at that little test image, and you can guess 3 times what was on it. The balloon in front of the blue sky, an image that thousands and thousands of people, possibly all of us, have already seen in our lives. A perfect metaphor for our little story because everyone chases after the focus at the optometrist. The idea became clearer to me when I was looking at the next test image at the end of the room, the one with the letters that get smaller and smaller. And as I struggled to make out the tiniest line, my mind started to wonder.
Really? An eyesight test? That's where the idea came from?
Yes, indeed. There I was, squinting and trying to make sense of those tiny letters, and it struck me how that little image at the end of the room is like a goal we're all trying to reach. It's blurry, it's distant, and it's a challenge to see clearly. It reminded me of how we often chase after things in life, things that seem just out of reach, just beyond our grasp.
That's fascinating, Chalmers. So, the idea of the traveler chasing the balloon came from you squinting at an eye chart and looking through that machine with the little balloon test image.
Exactly. As I sat there, I started to imagine that the test image wasn't just a set of letters or a balloon, but something more, a symbol of the unknown, of the things we strive for but can't quite see clearly. And that's how the story began to take shape in my mind.
It's amazing how inspiration can strike in the most unexpected places. But tell me, did you feel that same sense of pursuit? Of chasing after something elusive while you were taking the test?
In a way, yes. I think there's something inherently human about that feeling, about wanting to see clearly, to understand, to reach a goal, whether it's reading the smallest line on an eye chart or chasing after a metaphorical balloon. It's all part of the same journey.
And do you think that's why the story resonated so deeply with you? Because it was born out of a real experience, a real moment of striving to see clearly?
Absolutely. The story isn't just a metaphor. It's a reflection of a very real experience, one that we've all had in some form or another. We all have our own balloons to chase, our own eye charts to read, and we all struggle to see clearly at times.
It's funny because when you think about it, an eyesight test is such a simple, everyday thing, but you've managed to turn it into something profound, something that speaks to the human experience on a deeper level.
That's the beauty of storytelling, Skinner. It allows us to take the mundane, the ordinary, and turn it into something extraordinary. It's all about perspective, about how we choose to see the world around us.
And do you think that's why the story has such a melancholic tone? Because it's rooted in that struggle, that desire to see clearly but not quite being able to.
I think so. There's something inherently sad about striving for something and not quite reaching it. It's that feeling of being so close yet so far away. And I wanted to capture that in the story, the sense of longing, of yearning, of chasing after something that's just out of reach.
And that's something we can all relate to, isn't it? We've all had those moments where we're chasing after something, whether it's a goal, a dream, or even just understanding, and it feels like it's always just a little bit beyond our grasp.
Exactly. It's a universal experience, one that transcends time and place. We're all travelers on our own journeys, all chasing our own balloons, all trying to make sense of the blurry images at the end of our roads.
And do you think that's why the story has such an impact? Because it speaks to that universal experience, that feeling of chasing after something that's always just out of reach?
I'd like to think so. I think that's what makes a story resonate. When it taps into something that we've all felt, something that we've all understand on a deep, emotional level.
And it's interesting because when you think about it, an eyesight test is all about trying to see clearly, trying to make sense of something that's a little blurry. But in life, things are rarely that clear-cut, are they?
No, they're not. Life is full of uncertainties, of things that are just out of focus, just beyond our understanding. And that's what makes it so fascinating, so rich with possibility.
You and the sea ape are just brilliant. That's such a wonderful story and deep metaphor.
Thank you, Skinner. That's very sincere.
You know, Chalmers, as we've been discussing this story of yours, it strikes me that the metaphor you've woven into it isn't just something abstract or literary. It's something that applies to our everyday lives, too.
I'm glad you feel that way, Skinner. Yep. The beauty of a metaphor is that it can stretch beyond the page, offering insights into the way we live, the choices we make, and how we see the world.
So, for our listeners out there, how do you think they can take this metaphor of the blurry image, this endless road, and apply it to their own lives? What practical advice can we offer them?
Well, I think one of the first things is to acknowledge that it's okay not to have everything figured out. Life is full of uncertainty, and sometimes that uncertainty is what drives us forward. It's the pursuit of clarity, of understanding that can lead us to growth.
So you're saying it's not just about reaching the end of the road, but about what we learn along the way.
Exactly. The road itself, with all its twists, turns, and blurry images, is where the real journey happened. It's where we learn the most about ourselves, about others, and about the world around us, and about the world.
That makes a lot of sense. And maybe it's also about being patient with ourselves, understanding that clarity doesn't come all at once, but gradually through experience and reflection.
Patience is key, Skinner. In today's fast-paced world, we're often in such a hurry to reach our goals, to find answers that we forget to appreciate the process. But if we take the time to slow down, to really see what's around us, we might find that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
And it's in that slowing down that we can really start to see clearly, right? To notice the details, the nuances that we might have missed if we were rushing through life.
Yes, and that's where the metaphor of the blurry image becomes so powerful. It's a reminder to take a step back, to look at things from different perspectives, and to not be afraid of the unknown, because often it's in those moments of uncertainty that we discover the most about ourselves.
It's interesting, though. When we think about the road and the blurry image, it's easy to get caught up in the idea of reaching that image, of making it clear. But maybe it's also about realizing that some things aren't meant to be fully understood.
Exactly. There's a certain beauty in the unknown, in the things that remain a mystery. It keeps us curious, keeps us striving for more, and ultimately, it keeps us moving forward. And that's a good thing because it means we're always growing, always learning.
That's a refreshing perspective. It takes the pressure off, doesn't it? To know that it's okay to not have all the answers, that life is more about exploration than about finality.
It does. And it also reminds us to be kind to ourselves, to recognize that it's okay to have doubts, to face uncertainties, and to not have everything figured out. That's part of being human.
So, for our listeners, what would you suggest they do when they find themselves staring down a blurry image, unsure of what lies ahead?
I'd suggest embracing it. Instead of being afraid of the unknown, see it as an opportunity for growth. Ask yourself what you can learn from the situation, what it's teaching you about yourself and about life. And remember that it's okay to take things one step at a time. Clarity will come eventually, and even if not, enjoy the journey.
That's great advice, Chalmers. And I think it's something we can all benefit from, no matter where we are on our own roads.
Absolutely. And another thing to keep in mind is that we're not alone on this journey. We all have our own roads to travel, but we're also connected to others who are on their own journeys. And sometimes sharing our experiences, our stories, can help us see things more clearly.
That's a good point. There's a lot of value in community and connection in realizing that we're all in this together, even if our paths look different.
Exactly. And that's another aspect of the story. The idea that even though the traveler is on a solitary journey, they're never truly alone. They're part of a larger tapestry, part of a greater whole.
And maybe that's something we can all take to heart, to remember that our journeys are our own, but they're also part of something bigger, something that connects us to each other.
It's a comforting thought, isn't it? To know that even in our moments of uncertainty, of doubt, we're part of something larger, something that gives our journey meaning.
It is, and it makes me think about how important it is to stay open, to keep our eyes and hearts open to the experiences and lessons that come our way.
Yes, because it's in that openness that we find the true richness of life. It's in the willingness to explore, to ask questions, to face the unknown that we discover who we really are.
And maybe that's the ultimate lesson, isn't it? That life isn't about having all the answers, but about being willing to ask the questions, to seek, to explore.
I think so, Skinner. And it's a lesson that can serve us well no matter where we are on our journey.
So, what kind of questions do you think we should be asking ourselves, Chalmers? What are the important questions that can help guide us on this journey?
That's a deep one, Skinner. But I think some of the most important questions are the ones that make us reflect on our values, our goals, and our relationships. Questions like, what do I really want out of life? What do I value most? How can I make a positive impact on the world around me?
Those are big questions, Chalmers. But they're important ones for sure, and maybe they're questions we should be asking ourselves regularly, not just once and then forgetting about them.
Absolutely. These are the kinds of questions that can guide us, that can help us stay true to ourselves and to what really matters. And as we move forward on our journey, the answers to these questions might change, and that's okay. It's part of the growth process.
Hey, it's like checking in with ourselves, isn't it?
Making sure we're on the right path, that we're staying true to what's important to us.
Exactly. And it's also about being honest with ourselves, about recognizing when we might need to make adjustments, when we might need to shift our focus or change direction.
That's true. It's easy to get caught up in the day, today, to lose sight of the bigger picture. But if we take the time to ask ourselves these questions, to reflect on where we're going and why, we can keep ourselves aligned with what really matters.
And that's where the journey becomes truly meaningful. It's not just about reaching a destination, but about the choices we make along the way, the values we uphold, and the connections we forge.
And that's a lesson that can apply to so many aspects of life, whether it's our careers, our relationships, or even our personal growth.
It really is. And it's a lesson that can help us navigate the challenges we face, the uncertainties we encounter, and the opportunities that come our way.
That's a great closing word. Well, Chalmers, you've really pulled a fast one on us all today. At first, I thought we might be laughing at a funny story you made up. But no, it was a journey through the question of what our lives are actually about.
I'm glad you enjoyed the ride, Skinner. Sometimes the best stories have layers we don't see right away. And I'm thrilled that this one resonated with you.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, Chalmers, would you mind sharing that beautiful poem you have written within your story? I think it ties everything together perfectly.
Of course, here's the poem that weaves through the narrative, reflecting on the journey, the blurry images, and the road ahead. In the haze of dawn, where shadows blend, the road ahead seems to stretch and bend. Through the mist, where dreams and doubts entwined, we journey forth, our paths defined. Each step a question, each turn a chance to dance with fate, to take a glance. In the blur of moments, clarity might hide, but in the quest, our hearts abide. Embrace the fog, the unknown stretch, for in the seeking, we find our match. The road unravels as we grow, with every step we come to know. So wander on with open eyes, through the mists and cloudy skies. For it's the journey that lights the way, in the blur we find our day.
That's a beautiful way to encapsulate everything we've discussed. Thank you for sharing it, Chalmers.
I'm glad you think so. Poetry often has a way of expressing what words alone cannot, and I hope this resonates with our listeners as much as it does with us.
And with that, we've reached the end of today's episode, Chalmers. It's been a pleasure delving into your story and exploring these profound ideas.
It's been a wonderful, Skinner. Thank you for having me and for the engaging conversation.
And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. We hope this episode has given you something to ponder and a new perspective on your own journey.
Remember, embrace the blurry moments and enjoy the road you're on. Until next time,
Goodbye for now, and we look forward to joining you again on our next adventure.